It's going to be about, oh, there we are. This webinar will be about exploring OER use in Illinois, equity questions and opportunities. And just a few quick housekeeping items to remind you of. We do have these professional development webinars that highlight best practices and emerging trends. We have them typically on the first Wednesday of each month, and we move that a little bit to accommodate various conferences and holidays. You can also join us on the CCC OER listserv to stay connected about additional possibilities and professional development opportunities. It's a great place to also meet other members, make connections, and network, and also potential partnerships as well. A lot of folks meet each other, they apply for grants together, and they start really cool projects. So please join our listserv and get to know other people in the OER community. And I am so excited to introduce our two presenters today. The first will be Nina, and Nina Owolabi. She is a doctoral student in the Department of Education in Policy, Organization, and Research with a concentration in higher ed. Her research centers on the Black student experience at community colleges, and threads of that work draw upon critical and social justice lens to explore the lived experience of parenting students, those with disabilities, and also historically excluded groups, while interrogating the community college as a place of access and enclosure. Her professional background includes 15 years of education justice work focused on student program and curriculum development. And before joining OCCRL, Nina served as a member of the Community College Advisor and Faculty Club. I'm sorry, as a community college advisor and faculty member, not club. I've been working with students too long today. Our other co-presenter I'm excited to introduce is Aidana Sergebayeva, and she is also a doctoral student in the Department of Education Policy, Organization, and Leadership at Illinois, with a concentration in higher education. As a former higher education administrator, her research focuses on higher education, access to higher education, policy issues within higher education institutions, student affairs, and gender in higher education. So please join me in welcoming our wonderful presenters. And with that, I will stop sharing screen and allow them to share screen and move toward their presentation.
Everyone see the screen? Fantastic. All right. Well, how exciting. Thank you all so much for hosting us today. We are just so excited to be able to connect with you all, share a bit about our research work related to OER. We do count it an honor to be in a space that, that's already doing really such important work. Particularly around meaningful and impactful advocacy work and acting as this critical resource hub and connecting space for so many. So, we see our time today as a collaborative space. So, while Aidana and I will be doing a fair amount of talking, I do hope that we can offer what we'll call water cooler moments, throughout the presentation today to also hear from you all, because you are also experts in your own experience and what's happening on your campuses. And so, again, my name is Nina Owolabi. I am a senior research assistant with the Office of Community College Research and Leadership. I'm also a doctoral candidate within the EPOL program at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And I've been working on this OER project almost pretty much since I started at U of I about 4 years ago. So it's been exciting to see its progression over the last few years. And now I'll hand it over to my colleague to share a bit about her experience.
Thank you, Nina. Hi, everyone. My name is Aidana Sergebayeva. So I'm a doctoral student, and also I'm a research assistant at the Office of Community College Research and Leadership here at the University of Illinois. And OER project was one of my first projects once I joined the office. I've been in this project the last final year, and now happy to be with Nina and others who contributed to this project along the years, sharing and disseminating the results.
Thanks, Aidana. And so, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, similarly, it takes a village to see research projects come to fruition. So, I do want to take just a moment to acknowledge several people really involved with this project from the beginning stages, helping us to think through and frame even possible future research. So, first, we'd like to acknowledge Dr. Ebony Zamani Gallagher, a former director of OCCRL and current dean of the College of Education at the University of Pittsburgh. Really is her leadership and foresight in seeing OER as an emerging topic within the community college space that helps to even have us here today. We also want to shout out our current OCCRL director, Dr. Lorenzo Baber, who really helped push us to not only continue this work, but to deepen our understanding of how theory and practice inform one another, especially drawing from the lens of the fusion of innovation theory, which we will talk a little bit more about in just a little bit. And then lastly, also need to shout out Dr. Jose Del Real Viramontes, Dr. Lisa Perez, Dr. Tina Yao, Allende Rashan, and others who just really helped us with this work from so many angles. And so as we dive into today's presentation, here's just a little quick roadmap of what we'll discuss. We'll definitely share some context, really foregrounding what OCCRL is and how we came to begin researching OER, as well as a bit about some of the reports, blogs, podcasts, and other writings we've produced over the years. Then we'll definitely jump into our study, our goals, framework, methodology, findings, and wrapping with a brief discussion of kind of what this could mean for institutions. And so OCCRL, or the Office of Community College Research and Leadership, uses research and evaluation at the University of Illinois to improve policies, programs, and practices that enhance community college education and equity for all learners. And just having been a part of the OCCRL family for the last few years, I can say that equity considerations are truly at the heart of what we do. There's not a product that I've worked on or seen that really hasn't centered equity. And there's multiple ways that we accomplish this. And one of the biggest is through our longstanding relationship with the Illinois Community College Board, which is the state's coordinating body for programming, funding, and initiatives for the state's community colleges. And so through an ICCB grant that was made available through Perkins funds, our early work with OER focused on kind of first understanding what it is, because to be honest with you, we came to the work totally green, not really knowing, right, what OER is. So we needed to have that deeper understanding, and then also understanding what broad participation and access looks like, even as something, claims to be available for all. And so some of those questions that really arose for us when focusing on accessibility, including as it relates to disability and incorporation of curricular models such as universal design for learning, culturally sustaining pedagogy, as well as thinking about how the use of OER could be of particular support to vulnerable student populations. And so what you see on the screen here is a QR code for a direct link to some of that work that you can, check out and see for yourself some of the different things that we've worked on. One of which included a blog post and podcast featuring CCC OER's current director. Shout out to Heather. This was before she was director here, but kind of starting with that, we continue to unearth and think about the question: which students are benefiting from use of OER, really across demographics such as race, gender, and other identity factors. And so in our first publication, because of the nature of the grant, we focused energy on OER use in CTE programs, drawing from scholarly and public research, as well as publicly available information, like community college websites, for example. And we found, that the adoption of OER really could improve equity goals for community colleges. There just seemed to be so much potential there, but really more analysis was needed. We also noted that assessment and evaluation tools needed to be developed for OER and CTE. That was another space where additional research was needed, particularly as it relates to specific underrepresented and minoritized student populations. And kind of among recommendations here, we noted that there should be sustainable funding models for OER at the state and institutional levels. And finally, noting that there really is a need to develop an easy way for students to navigate and identify CTE programs that are using OER specifically. And so, I think everything was just kind of fortuitous when this report came out, because around that time, 2021, Illinois House Bill 332 passed into Public Act 102-0122, which essentially created a statewide task force to conduct an affordability study of college campus materials, with OER being one of the many ways, right, that institutions might be attempting to think about affordable materials and equity and access here. That report was later released in 2023 and actually does cite some of our work there. And also during this time, we were challenged in our thinking about who to center future research on, as we have found traditional faculty tend to be kind of the natural go-to, which makes sense, right? They're the ones typically creating OER, using it in the classroom, and in many instances, driving the energy behind OER initiatives. However, consistently, we found less research emphasizing those laying that groundwork and working in the background to coordinate initiatives, support faculty in designing OER, and in many ways are the experts, right? So OER programs are so frequently housed in the library. And Dr. Baber pushed our thinking too about the librarian as someone who really leads from the middle, frequently sitting at this intersection between academic affairs and student services, kind of depending on the structure of the institution. And so with that, that really inspired us as we were thinking about what future research here could look like, and led to this landscape study, which entitled Fostering Access, Affordability, and Equity, which you see here. And so, we also knew too that Illinois is already heading in a direction of continuing to bolster and support OER initiatives, as evidenced too by the pledging of millions of dollars to support statewide funds for OER. That momentum is absolutely there. So our study sought to expand upon our initial environmental scan to understand how OER is used as an equity initiative. And that was really our key question. What connection do community colleges see between equity and OER? And so I've been throwing around equity a lot. And so just to ensure you all are aware of what that definition was for us, we drew from the American Association of Colleges and Universities their definition of equity as the creation of opportunities for historically underserved populations to have equal access to and participate in educational programs that are capable of closing achievement gaps in student success and completion as well. And as we just continue kind of diving into the literature, I think the thing that really bubbled up for us is it is no secret that one of the easy draws for OER is the affordability piece for students. However, this emphasis on affordability is kind of often where the conversation pauses. Though OER is often deemed an answer to more affordable college materials, we found researchers are beginning to interrogate OER's ability to address equity concerns broadly. However, more research we're also finding elevates that potential of OER to more deeply benefit racially minoritized students. And so we kind of hearken to the Jenkins et al. Study done in 2020 at a California four-year institution, where they found that Latinx, Latine students tended to be more influenced by the textbook cost, meaning that they either outright avoided those kinds of classes in larger numbers and in proportions, or they failed a class because they did not purchase the book or they could not afford the textbook. And so, we understand this is more of the four-year kind of context. However, we also found this as an opportunity to kind of add to that space, and also became then this interesting time period as well. I do want to give a shout out to the Consortium of Academic and Research Libraries in Illinois, because they were also elevating some of the happenings in community colleges through their recent survey of students. And so, we're researchers, so apologies for all the long list of different references here. Certainly, you're welcome to read up on these on your own, and we'll have these noted at the end of the presentation. I'm not going to go through all of them, I promise, but the other thing that kind of became apparent for us in this literature review, as I mentioned before, is just that incredible potential of OER and connecting open practice and open education praxis to equity kind of beyond that literal cost. We can't undersell the importance of that, but we know there's opportunity there. And so with that, I'm now going to hand the virtual mic over to Idana to walk us through a bit more of our theoretical framework for our research.
Thank you, Nina. So one of the things we were thinking about as we approached this work was, how does innovation work? In this case, OER implementation or overall adoption. So what is involved? What factor help us to understand how something like OER can spread to an intended audience? And diffusion of innovation by Rogers became a way for us to think about, when do we see something emerge? So Rogers described diffusion as a process by which an innovation is communicated through certain channels over time among the members of the social system. This process is shaped by the characteristics of the individuals leading the innovation and the overall rate of adoption. As you can see on the slide, there are 5 categories of innovators or population that Rogers divided them accordingly. So the first smallest portion is the innovators, those part of the population who straightforward will implement the innovation. The next follows the early adopters, who are the second in the stage, and then the chasm happens, and the majority of the population usually falls into the early majority or late majority. And Rogers named the final stage of the population who either never implements the innovation or implements it at the very latest stage. He called them laggards. So the rate of adoption within an institution hinges innovation perceived advantages, who decides to innovate, social awareness of innovation, the normative nature of change within the social system, and the promotion of the innovation by recognized change agents. So our overall study was a qualitative study, meaning we have not conducted any statistical analysis, and we had only 2 instruments. First is a survey. We have sent out the survey to all, at the time, 48 Illinois community colleges, and because we already knew who are involved within the community colleges into the OER implementation or engaged with this work. It was a purposeful sampling of the participants. And the final question on our survey was recruiting individuals, people for further deep diving interviews. And our survey questions had a different categories of questions about OER adoption, implementation process, access, cost and benefits, perspectives of the main stakeholders, management and maintenance, evaluation and assessment. We also covered a little bit about the COVID impact. Did it impact it any way to the OER process? And also how OER process worked in the career technical education. Our interview questions was similar to the survey questions where we were able to ask individuals and also their perspectives working and from the perspective from their campuses and their work, how OER works in their respective campuses. Next slide, please, Nina. So overall, the survey has recruited 28 responses. That's the total number, and the individual interviews, we had only 6 participants. Each interview was transcribed for accuracy. And as you can see in the slide, responses to whether institutions promoted OER awareness to students were different, threefold. Most of the respondents disagreed, some of them agreed, and the rest were unsure of this policy at all. The same is seen with student support services awareness about OER, where majority, 80% of the participants responded that these services either are not aware or they have never heard about OER within their institutions. And overall, from the survey, we have concluded that many Illinois community colleges are at the initial stages of OER implementation. Also would like to describe our participants. We have divided their descriptions about the location of their community colleges and also their roles. As you can see, most of them, 4 of them were in suburban areas, 1 in a rural area, and 1 college was in a rural area. And 5 out of 6 participants were mainly librarians, their main job functions, and 1 of them was a faculty member whose secondary job was engagement with OER as a library liaison. So talking about findings, the implementation of OER differs between the colleges, with some offering incentives to faculty while others relying on individual motivation. And today we have chosen 2 main findings that we find relevant while speaking about equity questions and opportunities. The first one is faculty attitudes toward OER. Librarians or library liaison faculty members are typically the responsible one for implementing OER. They oversee it, work with faculty, and offer workshops. Some participants believe that successful OER implementation needs a statewide legislative support, while others believe in the collective power of librarians and college leadership. Some genuinely believe that only faculty-led partnership will successfully implement OER at the college. So the faculty attitudes toward OER also varied across the institutions. Faculty members who have used OER materials are further adopting OER in their courses and also looking independently for appropriate materials advancing their courses. Financial incentives work well with introducing OER adoption for new faculty and motivating them to use the affordable course materials in class. Without an adequate incentive, many faculty members are not motivated to change well-established courses, ones that have been running for quite some time. One participant mentioned that new changes, such as updating course materials, should be introduced by respected faculty in each department to reach other faculty members' attention. And here I would like to share a citation from our participant. You can't just say, oh, we are going to do this and have faculty do that, because they won't do it. And he also added, you can have that as objective, but you have to figure out a completely different way of how do we get to that objective. In many cases, OER proponents must be creative and strategic in their messaging to key stakeholders. And in this term, I would like to pose two main questions. You're welcome to respond it now, put it in the chat, or have some time to think about them and reflect at the end of our presentation. So because most of you are in this presentation somehow engaged and part of the stakeholders within the institutions and OER projects, what has been your experience of working or engaging with OER on your campuses? What challenges have you faced working with OER materials as a faculty member or working with the faculty? What are some practices you think work best for your campus? Nina?
I just wanted to give a little space to see if there was anyone who was ready to share their experience here. This is our first of a few water cooler breaks. So we'd love to, as I mentioned, it's a collaborative space, so we'd love to also hear from you.
I could pop in with my question just to warm us up. So I used to be a faculty member and then I was a dean trying to kind of grow my OER program at my community college in my last job. And funding and resources was always a thing, right? Because we would ask faculty to spend all this time and effort restructuring their course around this great new OER that would support students. But a lot of times it was their own personal time, it was their summer vacations. So chasing the funding, chasing the resources was a major challenge for me when I was doing that work. How about other folks?
Hi, yeah, I can jump in and talk a little bit about my experience. I am Kiran Jodhkar from Conestoga College, Canada, and have collaborated on many OER projects at my college. And I feel proud saying that my college really support faculty in terms of, funding and giving them enough hours and resources to work on open education resources. The only challenge that I would say I've seen is with respect to motivating faculty to do something, to actually work, bring a new idea and work on an open education resource. So that I feel has been a challenge. Thank you.
And you've got something in chat as well from Barry Bailey, and he has two items. And number one, instructors are overall enthused, but implementation always takes longer and more work than they expect. And two, it took us years to understand the importance of compensation, and it was finally embedded into our academic master plan. For external funding, we're considered a fairly affluent area, so getting awarding agencies to understand the diversity of our population and who all would actually benefit has been a challenge.
If I could comment on that a little more, I'm also our Board of Regents has put together for the state of Kansas initiatives to work towards OER, and we've coordinated to try to get legislative funding at the state level. And our efforts have been good, but prior to that, our external awards that we tried to pursue, even when we're all working together as every state-based agency, community college and four-year and technical college, we were still in some of the larger grants too small of an area to compete against some other collaborative efforts from either other states or multiple state groups. So that's been our challenge right now in getting sort of more money in front of people. But I am happy that our college, again, your mission drives what you do. And when we were able to incorporate OER, or I can't remember how we worded it, but affordable resources for our students, when we were able to actually implement that into our academic master plan, then mini grants and stipends became something that we could justify funding again, and that's been nice. This is our first year pursuing it after a break when it couldn't get justified, and we're happy to work on it.
Thank you so much, Barry, for that. And I think it's actually a perfect kind of lead in to our next kind of finding here, kind of around that administrative influence. And the reason being is, it might not really come as a surprise that institutions with some of the strongest kind of OER programming from the perspective of the librarians also had some of the most tangible administrative support. And so, Barry, you actually spoke to some of this, right? Like, compensation written into union contracts, line items in the budget, campus-wide coalitions in which key admin attended meetings, actually participated in meetings, right? Roles dedicated to OER creation and support, but also, and two, this is to Barry's point, OER noted in important institutional documents. So that means equity plan, strategic framework, and goals. These were all, kind of key indicators of strong administrative influence. And I think also really underscores and shows kind of how interesting the critical nature of administrative influences in these situations too, of where tensions could potentially arise. We found that the bookstore frequently plays a role, kind of this key role in helping to amass data about who's buying books, helping to categorize which courses are using textbooks, support and course marking. And so this is a stakeholder who is of import, right? An important partner. And at institutions with some of the more stable OER support programs, this relationship was also stable. But, we found likely in part because of C-suite level administrative influence. We spoke with the institutional representative where at the time, at least, it did not seem that that administrative support was fully there. And it kind of made for a contentious relationship between those seeking to bolster the OER programming and representatives of the bookstore. So there's this political element involved. And without the express backing of administration, there seemed to kind of be less leverage to have the dialogue that might actually move that relationship forward. So some of this, the librarian attributed to a generally conservative orientation of the faculty and leadership on campus, which seemed to be defined by this idea. And this is a quote, students being lazy or not interested in their education. And this person further said it's a very conservative campus, so I think that there's a lot of perceptions of students being lazy or not interested in their education that kind of leads to a notion that they should just buy the book. So that's how the school works. They should just do this. So I'm not engaging in the conversation. That last piece kind of speaking to from the perspective of maybe someone who's not as supportive of utilizing OER for many of the reasons that you all had actually mentioned around compensation, around just the level of time and energy that it can take, and maybe not necessarily having the administrative infrastructure to be able to see these things come to fruition. And so this participant perceived that there were fewer opportunities to engage faculty kind of in those larger conversations about equitable pedagogy. Still, the participant acknowledged that an administrative change, which seemed to be coming to the campus at the time of the interview, could actually potentially override that concern about ideological orientation. So actually could potentially overcome some of the apathy that they were kind of seeing among faculty, for example. So I think this just kind of further underscores that the importance of that kind of administrative influence. And so moving into water cooler break number 2 here, we are also interested to kind of hear your experiences either working with various stakeholders to implement OER initiatives, or maybe where there were differences in thought, right, of how to see this programming move forward. How did you or your institution overcome those to see a program come to fruition? And I should also note, we can definitely take any related questions, maybe one or two related questions during this time as well as folks are thinking about what that experience has looked like for them.
And Shelley Gilliam has a couple of great comments there about how her community college is handling it in terms of tiered compensation, and then really having organized deadlines and cohorts. I have a question both for our presenters and maybe others. Did you ever encounter a faculty group or department that insisted on creating their own OER despite the fact that there were reasonably good OERs already available for adoption? That they sort of were asking for a different level of compensation or activity or kind of the effort needed rather than going with the existing ones? And if so, how was that handled?
Well, from our perspective, that wasn't necessarily something that came up in our conversations with the various librarians. I mean, it sounds kind of like an exciting one to see, faculty actually excited. Yeah, I shouldn't say actually, but a faculty excited to really dive in and try something new. So I'm also interested to hear from the audience if that's something that you've encountered.
Got a few comments in chat. Barry's talking a little bit about having bookstore support. Lauren Cosrow is talking about a peer review committee that review applications for support. And I think that peer review committee could actually be great, Lauren, for the question I'm asking too, where they could determine if it's warranted to have creating a new one versus adopting an existing one. Kimberly Carter talks about the encouragement to repurpose what's already in existence.
It's really cool to see these suggestions kind of popping up. And honestly, each of these could turn into their own, kind of research question here. So I love this. Thank you all for your thoughts and your feedback here. And so I want to hand the mic over to Idana.
Thank you. So we'd like to highlight maybe three main concepts or ideas we think is important as thinking about implications of this study. So the first and foremost is that Illinois community colleges have an area of context that impacts the degree to which OER is adopted. As Nina has spoken and I have highlighted, different reasons, stakeholders, and also within the college, different powers impact the OER adoption. And it's very targeted to the local institution and how it works within the system that they have adopted to work. So we couldn't have any one collective point which was similar or shared across all the community colleges. And the second one is like there's definitely a need for clear messaging and communication with OER adopters and administrators, because we have seen that administrative support is very important. And those institutions that had that support were able to apply for grants, have that grants, incentivize their faculty and other people engaged with OER processes, and really advance in this area, while those who didn't have administrative support were facing and experiencing different barriers. So we think that clear messaging and communication within different stakeholders is very important.
And I think what also kind of became clear from interviews, from survey, was really just the number of opportunities that existed for greater involvement from diverse stakeholder groups. And this is a part of that where that equity piece, right, kind of comes in. Institutions that seem kind of stuck, at least from the perspective of the librarians, might have benefited from engaging in student affairs, engaging with advisors, student leaders, and student government, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion committees. You know, at some institutions, those at the tables were frequently faculty, librarians, and sometimes administrators at various levels. And some institutions, as we noted, with particularly strong programs, were able to also enlist their institutional researchers, maybe bringing the bookstore to the table to support data collection. But others could also speak to how they connected with DEI groups, especially in discussions of pushing beyond just OER to now open practices, for example. Another smaller program we spoke with kind of noted the potential that could come from engaging their DEI group on campus, but they at the time just didn't seem certain that that would happen, and that's because they were maybe more so at the beginning stages of their programming there. But you know, a key kind of untapped group that really bubbled up from these conversations or student leaders, and you know, thinking about how can we connect with student leaders to actually see um, more buy-in, you know, to open educational resources on campus. And so, you know, we found, and also even our participants noted, you know, students are some of the community college's greatest assets. So many students can easily make that connection to affordable campus materials, right? Because they're living it every day. So it does seem like a bit of a missed opportunity not to engage them in meaningful ways, both in advocacy and creation of OER. What kind of takes OER into that space of kind of representational justice is this idea that those using the materials also get to have a hand in creating and sharing knowledge. So, you know, one way that OCCRL has participated in this work has come through our efforts with the student advisory committee, these or student trustees. We hosted a training with this group with and it was in line with kind of this heavy focus over the last couple of years on affordable college materials. So discussion of OER fit right in. We discussed what OER is, then spent significant time thinking about how students could be advocates for OER use on campus through one research methodology actually called photo voice. And photo voice is a powerful participatory action research method that allows researchers to record and reflect their community strengths and concerns and promote kind of this critical dialogue of what's happening. This methodology has also proven to be supportive and impactful for reaching policymakers. So shout out to Senior Research Assistant Ayinde Rashan, who is doing impressive work with Photo Voice and actually led that training, you know, which helped the student leaders to think about how they could connect this accessible methodology to their own experiences and understanding of OER. And we see that there's more to kind of come from that work. You know, we also shared out that we did a recent podcast in which we featured a student leader from John A. Logan College, Magnus Noble, who's done some extensive work advocating for OER, and he shared a number of opportunities to engage students in advocacy. So, for example, his institution is kind of leaning on student government to help even honor those doing impressive work with OER to kind of say, you know, here's, I don't want to say a gold star, but, you know, here's, you know, here are examples of folks who are, you know, who have been able to kind of utilize this in their class and see how their students are benefiting. And they're also even collaborating with faculty to facilitate OER support workshops. And I also mentioned Carly in the earlier part of our presentation here. They've recently conducted a large-scale survey of students attending public, private, and 4-year, 2-year colleges in Illinois. That would be, I encourage you all to kind of check that out because there were some interesting recommendations there as well. I know we're getting close to our time, but our last water cooler break here, we're interested to also hear from you all kind of what have been some ways that your institution has engaged students either in advocacy for or creation of materials. And if you're not quite there yet, that's okay. Let's dream a little bit. What could this look like for you, or what do you desire?
I could talk a little about California. So California passed legislation that requires us to mark zero textbook cost materials in our class schedules. And we have 116 community colleges in our system. We're a really big ship. So that has been a big deal. And we engaged our faculty or our student senates and ASG at most of our colleges to promote that. And they got right on board in most institutions. They get very, very excited. It's a very simple concept. ZTC, you can recognize it, you can promote it, you can tell students about it, and they've been amazing partners. So that was a nice way to get them excited about the concept. But I haven't considered OER materials, in terms of students participating in that as much. So I would also love to hear about this. Got a couple items in chat from Francis, Kimberly, and Rachel. Francis talks about we're not there yet, but we do ask compensated faculty to report out the impact on students, which is cool. And Kimberly Carter says we hire work study and co-op students to work with us in providing faculty wraparound supports. And Rachel says our students in the community colleges are strong advocates, but they're in school such a short time, it's hard to get them engaged. Yep, I hear you on that, Rachel.
That's a really great point, Rachel. And I love the idea of tapping into work study students. I mean, and that's where the funding is coming from, federally, right? So there's just that opportunity to engage those who are already kind of in that space, in very meaningful ways.
I can also shortly add to that student engagement and how you can work with them. Recently this year, as a PhD student, I'm still taking courses, and one of final paper, we're working with our group mates in group of 2 or 3 and write out chapters of a book on the topic that is by the faculty member. I know it's a lot of efforts because she has collected all the papers. Sure, she will grade it towards the final course paper, but those who are interested will volunteer to work further on the revisions of the paper, and hopefully we'll publish it in the March of next year.
I love that because it centers, the student also too as a knowledge creator. And what a powerful way, for students to kind of tap into that space, and also a great learning experience for future transfer. Like there's so many skills and opportunities there.
I want to make sure you all saw Lauren's cool comment that their students are participating in creating a bio lab manual and their first audiobook of a textbook. I love having student voices do that. That's fantastic. Barry talks about the overlap of non-traditional students who are also staff members, and they end up on the governance or committees. And then Andrea is talking about we partner with our career office to host an advocacy student internship, which is really great. And then Kiran Jat says, as author and collaborator, I have engaged students as volunteers in student review and creating auxiliary resources.
Amazing ideas, and I think demonstrates you all's like power and awesomeness, but that this can happen, and it can happen on a small scale, and it can also grow to be a larger aspect of what happens kind of institution wide. And so, that brings us kind of to the end of our presentation here. We have some resources and references here that will be available to you all at some point. There's presentation. And then, of course, again, referencing our OER product page. We definitely encourage you all to take a look. If there are any resources that might be of support to some of the things that you all are doing, that would be great. And, thank you. Thank you again for having us.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Idana and Nina. This was really amazing. And just, I really appreciate the great engagement from our audience as well. So let's give them a Zoom round of applause, whether you want to use an emoji or put your hands up and share screen. I am going to just do one last thing to ask of you, which is to please take our short survey and let us know how we can improve webinars in the future. Getting your feedback will be so important in order to continue to provide you with the PD that you need and have opportunities to share these great ideas like we heard from Nina and Idana today. So please don't leave without doing that. I promise it'll only take you a matter of seconds to complete it. And then again, here is our contact information if you want to reach out. And thank you very much for your time and your participation today. And again, thank you so much to Nina and Idana.